Hi, everybody. Michael Guberti, digital marketing strategist, co-founder of Guberti Giving, a nonprofit that helps youth, single moms, and veterans. And today is another episode of Marketing That Clicks, another very also insightful and profound episode in topic, certainly. As my expert guest today is Rob Shickel, a 15-year plus survivor of a rare aggressive cancer. And since 2004 against cancer, he has had direct, in his words, combat experience against several treatment regimens, including numerous misdiagnosis clinical trials, FDA-approved and ad-hoc chemos and biologic treatments, radiation surgeries, and watch and see, end quote. He now advises cancer patients worldwide over the internet. And he founded My Chronic Cancer, LLC, as an internet platform for cancer patients. He has authored and published two true fiction books on surviving cancer that you can find on Amazon, including My Chronic Cancer Advocacy for Cancer Survival. And he's currently heading development of a novel AI-oriented cloud-based cancer software system. Rob, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being here. And if I could ask you how you got started doing what you are doing now. We heard a little bit of your story, but I'm sure there's more to it.
So at the outset, I went through many misdiagnosis, and after a very lengthy period of time, I entered a clinical, or not, pardon me, not a clinical, but a standard treatment for my cancer. And when I walked in for the treatment, and this is in jest, but it's true, I arrived early, and the only other people in that hospital treatment area at that time was this young couple and this little boy. And I thought, nah, can't be. They have to be here for somebody else. Michael, I could not have been more wrong. So it was a very pretty young Italian nurse who had a cancer very close to mine, her husband and her little boy. And so in answer to your question, the way I got started in this, the way I'm doing it today, is that I lost my friend to the cancer. That was over 10 years ago, and I still have not gotten over it. I've tried going back to what I used to do, which is large life sciences software systems and FDA compliance, kind of a strange combination, but I wasn't successful at doing it. And so now my new career, which I'm successful at, is working with people who have cancer to get them to see a different perspective. And the way I would describe that as, in cancer, we're the third leg of the three-legged stool. And we often do not see that because we're so challenged by the next situation in front of us relative to the cancer. So what I do is I get people to see that they actually have a role. And what I've done is I've written these two books, which you aptly described. I call them true fiction, which they are. I've definitely changed the names to protect us innocents. But nonetheless, what they do is they take us through the cancer experience in a different way. What they do is, instead of being a kind of a non-fiction discourse about eat this, don't eat that, go here, don't go there, and so forth, what they are is that they are a journey with three cancer patients who have just been diagnosed as having cancer. In other words, they've been motoring along, using their turn signals, paying their mortgages, patting the dog on the head in the morning, and cancer. And what we do is we journey alongside them, and we experience cancer with them just as they have. And this is all true. And we see their mistakes. We see their inability to make decisions. We see the hard realities of treatments and relapses. And what we do is we get a chance to see who's making progress and who isn't, who's learning and who's adapting. And in the first book, I'm pulling punches. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm building a foundation for each of them. And I'm pulling punches because nobody dies. I didn't have the guts to do that. But in the second book, also true, this is a little bit of a point of humor here, is that I decided to stay up later and to have more red wine and pulled no punches. Yes, we did lose somebody, but what we did is we learned how to fight back against cancer, how to reapply the rules, how to become the third leg of the three-legged stool, how to use resources and how to use technologies, even in very adverse cancer situations, to reach a state of chronic cancer, if you will. And so for me, where I should be right now is I should be a treatment every 2 weeks and a maximum dosage of about 28 milligrams. I'm not even close to that. I am now at 5 weeks and on a treatment, and I'm at the minimum dosage of 7 milligrams, and we would go lower, except we can't cut that dose lower because of the formulation requirements with the FDA.
Wow.
And so if you were to look at me now, and this is not to brag, you can't tell that I have cancer. I'm basically back to a high quality lifestyle and very healthy. And yet I still have the same rare, aggressive, incurable cancer with the same short mortality, but this is now 15, 16 years later. It'll be 16 years in June.
That's excellent. Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't have known. That you had. And it's a great way that you have handled this. And I got to inquire based on that, how has, on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being excellent and 1 being it really, really could be better, the healthcare system played a role in your experience? Have they done their job? Have they half done their job or something else?
You know, that's a very, very interesting and important question, Michael. And the reason why is when we step back and look at the healthcare system, the United States is incredibly unique in that respect. And I say this both as a cancer patient, but also because I've worked in life sciences software and FDA compliance. And so in the beginning, I'll be honest with you, I did not get it. Even though I should have, I didn't get it. But where I'm going with, in answer to your question, is we are incredibly fortunate in the United States to have what's called NCI hospitals. And so National Cancer Institute, which is a unit of the National Institutes of Health, these are federal level organizations, actually has created a set of standards that hospitals can subscribe to. And 67 of those hospitals in the United States have subscribed to those. So here where I am in Connecticut, Yale is one of those hospitals. In Boston is Dana-Farber, and outside of San Francisco, down in Silicon Valley, Stanford Cancer Center is one of those hospitals. So there's 67 of those across the United States, including Hawaii. And what's important about that is that that's where the money goes for clinical trials. That's where the very, very bright people go, because that's how they want to practice their oncology business. And that's where we as cancer patients should be going. This is not to disparage any other hospital, but in answer to your question, it's very important to understand that cancer is a very different health challenge, and the right place to go is to these NCI hospitals.
Very important wording and a very important acronym for people who may benefit from that information. Then let me ask you, given your over a decade of experience on this topic, plus, how, and I ask everybody this inquiry of, if you had to take your life's message, all that you've learned, and summarize it into a single sentence, what would that sentence be?
I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity that cancer has given me. I will never say that I'm grateful for cancer. That would be pretty stupid. But I was a person who was always after the next materialistic objective, the next Mercedes, the yacht club, you name it, the biggest party. I was always one of those. And today, I couldn't care less. My Volvo has 200,000 miles and it runs like a Swiss watch. I couldn't care less. But if I can extend this a little bit further, literally today and yesterday, I've had two occurrences. People have reached out. One is a young man whose mom has been diagnosed literally the day before with a rare leukemia. And so he's beside himself and he didn't know any other place to go. He reached out to me. And so I'm now working with him. I'm not a doctor. I don't purport to have the ability to solve her problem, but I can help him get her to where she needs to be. Literally this afternoon, a person reached out to me from Boston who said, my mom has just, after 12 years, had a reoccurrence of breast cancer. And what do I do? And so this exactly the same situation, and this happens all the time. So what I'm doing with her is I'm working with her to get her to a specialist in breast cancer. And a way to put this into perspective is that breast cancer is comprised of 5 molecular types, and there are 15 subtypes. And in each of those 15 subtypes, you can have 3 to 4 additional variables. So for an oncologist to treat breast cancer, that oncologist could literally be faced with hundreds, if not thousands, of different combinations, not to include how to select the appropriate treatment modality. That could include chemo, it could include surgery, it could include radiation. And so what I do is I help that person get to someone who has that particular expertise. I've developed a very unique capability on figuring out how to narrow the field for the selection of doctors at these NCI hospitals.
Fascinating. Okay, so you help select the most quality MD for their situation. Then let me ask you, this is after they've learned either themselves or someone they love, in the examples you gave, someone they love has cancer or that it reoccurred in their life.
Right.
What if we went before that a little bit on the timeline? Would you say, is there any best practices or recommendations that come to mind as preventative measures against getting cancer, perhaps to begin with?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. Very, very few people ask that question. And it comes down to this. People talk about cancer as being in the water, and I don't think it is, but nonetheless, I say to them, clean up your act. Just get away from the garbage food. Your body wasn't built for that stuff. Secondly, get into good life practices. Get decent sleep. It's very important to get good quality sleep. 7.5 hours a night are excellent. Get away from the heavily loaded foods. So my personal perspective, I have totally gotten away from red meat. Somebody else may not want to do that, but those foods are loaded with all kinds of additives that our bodies were just never built to process. The other thing, and we see this all the time on the TV, and so I say this to sports people in particular, don't get into the tattoos. There is a recent study. It has some problems with it in terms of the controls, but there's a recent study about the consequence of tattoo inks in the body. And ultimately, look at it this way. Our lymphatic system is basically part of our septic system. And so we, particularly athletes, we see it a lot on athletes, but nonetheless, whether it's an athlete or somebody else, once those inks are in the body, it's up to the lymphatic system to purge those pathogens. And what they do is they end up in our lymph nodes. Ultimately, that goes to places like our kidneys and to our bladders. And it's not a surprise that we're seeing a high increase in blood cancers, because that's where the inks are showing up and they're destabilizing our immune system and our lymphatic system. And urinary tracts as well. Just don't do it.
I completely agree. Don't do it. And it's so fascinating. These athletes, many of whom spend decades of their life building their body and their physicality, only to then inject it with the pathogens, are going to maybe in their later years, if not in the immediate present, start to feel it.
So I'll give you an example, and not to stretch this out, but a very challenged individual who is no longer alive was Aaron Hernandez, New England Patriots and other teams. But if you were to look at him, let's say with his shirt off, he was heavily tattooed. And so it's just a health challenge looking to happen.
Yeah.
Clean up your life.
Clean up your, 4 great words. Clean up your life. That's perfect.
Yes.
So now
these are things that we can do. We don't need a doctor to help us do it.
I agree. It's all within our power. And given a message like that, as quality of a message as that is, and you mentioned you use the internet to reach people, Seattle to Singapore. What would you say are your 3 favorite tactics or strategies to reach people and share this message with others?
What happened with me is the way this whole thing got started is that I was on a podcast internet interview, much like what we're doing, July 3rd, 2011 at Yale.
Oh.
I had no idea what was going to happen. I thought I did terrible. My doctor thought I did great. I asked her not to publish it. She said, Rob, forget it. It's gone. It's already on the internet. Anyways, what happened after that is that people who have their backs to the wall in these cancers eventually found that interview. And so ever since July of 2011, I have been working with people over the internet. And it's reached the point where I'm just stretched incredibly thin. I will never, ever say no. I have never taken a dime for this. It's in thanks for the 3 people who helped me. This is my payback, my way of saying thanks, giving my life back. So I've now created a website at mychroniccancer.com. I've published 2 books. Those are both on Amazon. And I'm going to be reaching the point fairly soon, second half of this year, where I'm going to have to start getting more sophisticated about the use of the internet. So SEO, search engine optimization, marketing tools, things that I don't know yet, I'm going to have to start using. But the internet site is the first step.
I agree with you. And for everybody, just as a repeat on what Rob said, mychroniccancer.com, his book, My Chronic Cancer Advocacy, on Amazon, one of his 2 Amazon books. And you are also, in addition to sharing your expertise on the platforms you mentioned, in the process of developing a novel AI cloud-based cancer software system, if I could inquire a little bit about that.
Sure. Not many people do, but the explanation is that my background is complex math and software. So back in the 80s, I used to work for the French Atomic Energy Commission And what we used to do is to figure out how to use these very high-speed CDC computers to get them to solve very complex problems by making them run faster. And so I've always been in this, so to speak, but when the cancer came along, I became distracted. And then as I began to regain my health as a result of what my friend, the nurse, and then my doctor and another doctor were able to accomplish, I decided that I would go back and use those skills to see if I could improve my success relative to the cancer. And so what has happened is that using algorithms that I had created previously and merging them into software, there is now a system that I use with my medical team at Yale. And this is not FDA approved yet, so I just want to be very clear about it. It is not commercially available yet. But if I can put it into very simple terms, what the system does is it hacks into the cancer and it hacks into the immune system. And by doing that, we're able to read the cognitive reasoning of the cancer relative to the immune system and relative to the treatment that I get, so that we can anticipate what the cancer is going to do before it does it.
Interesting. So you are looking at the code of the cancer.
In a way, yes.
And then you're predicting its behavior and then preparing any important parties as to how it could combat what you feel and what the system is saying the cancer is about to do.
The answer is yes. And in fact, the realization of that goes back to what I was saying earlier. A person such as myself with this rare blood cancer would ordinarily have a treatment that would be every 2 weeks. And they would almost certainly never be able to get off of the maximum dose, which for me would be approximately 28 milligrams. With this system approach, we're able to increase the treatment cycle to 5 weeks or 35 days. And I've been as high as 7 weeks. And we've been able to reduce the dose by a factor of 4, from 28 milligrams down to 7 milligrams. And I have been there now 2.5 to 3 years.
Wow. Wow.
So it's not a fluke. It's not a one-time event. Nope. I've been doing it now. So when you and I met in October, I did a simple modification of the schedule so that we could meet at that time frame in New York. And I was already at 5 weeks. My doctor and I just agreed to stretch it to 6 weeks, 42 days.
That's a great decision, because now you get to share this message with more people. And wow, so it's great that you've been able to sustain that time period. And it shows that, hey, yeah, this is not a one-hit wonder setup. This is something that is very legitimate.
Yes, well, if we were not able to read into the cancer's cognitive reasoning, we simply wouldn't be able to do this. And so what will happen is that I do the updates all the time, so it's very much real time. And so when I go to meet my doctor, we'll review this. She makes her decisions independent, for sure, but nonetheless, we rely on it quite a bit. It simply wouldn't be possible.
Understood. It's great that you get this tool, software is reading the mind of the cancer so that you could be 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of it. And then you're yourself being a testimony to its power and profound transformative effects. I would say, I mean, this has been extremely insightful. And for as insightful as this message is, do you have an email list that someone could perhaps join to learn more about this or receive updates from you? Or how could someone learn more about what you're doing?
Stay in touch with me through the website, and the contact is info at mychroniccancer.com.
Perfect. Info at mychroniccancer.com, and the website, as Rob mentioned, mychroniccancer.com. If you're on Amazon, the book is My Chronic Cancer Advocacy. You'll be able to see Rob listed as the author along with his other book. Well, Rob, Shickel, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your message, being an example of someone who can, with a positive attitude, persistence, and best practices, live a great life and help others doing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.